Welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're embarking on a deeply philosophical journey, and honestly, it's one that really requires us to adopt a somewhat somber, reflective tone. We are going to map out a fascinating four-act psychological evolution. Think of it as a Gothic fable. It tracks the transformation of a character we'll call the Wanderer, who moves from a life of comforting, cozy illusions all the way to the sovereign autonomy of the Übermensch, or the free spirit. It's essentially an epic of the human mind, and we're going to unpack exactly how this evolution happens, step by step. To really grasp where this ends up, we got to understand where it starts. So picture this. Deep within the claustrophobic, heavily inked shadows of an old Gothic city, we find our protagonist. He's a cartographer. For 40 years, this mapmaker has lived right here, wrapped in the comforting warmth of the city. His entire life's work, illuminating official charts and drawing these absolute myths, beautiful places where paradise is safely guarded by the divine. But as we'll see, these beautiful maps serve a much darker purpose. They are, in fact, a beautifully crafted mechanism designed purely to hide from objective truth. Act 1. The discrepancy. Shedding the sacred maps. Let's see where the illusion first begins to fracture. Look at the profound visual and philosophical contrast here. The journey towards sovereign autonomy doesn't usually begin with some loud, explosive rebellion. No, it starts quietly, with an inescapable crisis of intellectual honesty. On a single, completely cloudless autumn evening, the cartographer looks up, and that shared illusion of the city, it just shatters. He realizes the beautifully drawn, golden-leafed gods on his maps simply do not match the cold stars of objective reality. Now, at first, there's a kind of gilded denial. He draws even more ornate paradises, adding shimmering cherubim just to cover up the cracks in his worldview. But you can't unsee it. The truth of the universe is utterly terrifying and entirely indifferent. The real turning point arrives with a devastating realization. Accuracy cannot be undone by beauty. He recognizes, finally, that the universe doesn't care about human longing. It's completely indifferent. And so, he makes the ultimate sacrifice. He leaves those heavy city gates behind. He trades the cozy shelter of those absolute myths for the vast, barren desert of objective reality. He's no longer a cartographer of illusions. He has become the wanderer. Act 2. The incision. Surgical critique of forgeries. We are leaving the dense shadows of the Gothic city behind, entirely. Let's look at how this builds our wanderer's internal strength. Notice how the aesthetic completely shifts here to the stark, bone-white dust of isolation. The wanderer isn't just displaced, he is now a ruthless philologist of the human soul. And this brings us to a massively foundational concept, the will to power. In this specific context, think of the will of power as that underlying vitality, that drive for raw, unadorned truth that compels the wanderer to kneel in the dust. Armed with a jagged quill and the surgical tools of etymology, he uses this will to power to perform a ruthless autopsy on the sacred manuscripts inherited from his fathers. He isn't looking for devotion anymore. He's demanding the bedrock of existence. Now, of course, the old world doesn't just let go easily. As the wanderer cuts away the suffocating moss of theology, literally holding these holy scripts up to a dying light to expose the anxious, completely human hands that forged them, the city priests start shrieking from the distant gates. They call him exactly what he appears to be to the fearful. They say he's a cold monster who hates his friends and loves only a barren reality. But the wanderer, he just ignores them. He is slicing right through the ink-stained lies of civilization. Act 3. The palimpsest. Birth of vocabulary sovereignty. The crucial point is what happens right here, beneath the punishing sun of the desert. The wanderer grips the very foundations of human speech. We're talking about words like good, evil, sin, and duty. And he treats them like a palimpsest, an ancient scroll where old writing has been scraped off just to make room for new text. Step 1. He strips away the layers of historical resentment. Step 2. He exposes the original Homeric vitality underneath, actually proving that what the meek called evil was often just the sheer strength and vitality that they envied. And finally, step 3. By tracing these etymologies, he attains vocabulary sovereignty. And you know what? This discovery isn't sad. It's incredibly liberating. By realizing that these grand moral categories are just human artifacts, written and rewritten to serve changing masters rather than being divine laws, he is finally freed. Because humanity fundamentally thinks in words, mastering his language gives the wanderer total mastery over his own mind. He has successfully transformed the unexamined chains of his past into nothing more than broken ornaments lying in the sand. Act 4. The Noon. The shadowless great noon. We have reached the philosophical and visual climax of our explainer. Notice how the colors and lighting are shifting here? Think about that stark visual contrast between the dark, claustrophobic Gothic city we started in and this blinding, bright desert before us. The shadows of the old world are entirely eradicated by this vertical, absolute clarity. This is the Great Noon. It is the ultimate realization of the Übermensch ideal. The heavy weight of ancestral superstitions and old contaminations just falls away completely. At this zenith, the corrupted, charred vellum of the past is cast into the heat haze, utterly consumed by the fire of the sun. But there is one final piece of the past still desperately trying to hold on. Right at the stroke of noon, a dialogue takes place. The rasping, fading voice of the wanderer's own shadow, which perfectly represents the resentful morality of that old city, makes one final, desperate attempt to cling to him. Whispering mockingly in the vertical light, the shadow says, "Without the sacred laws, you are merely a monster wandering in the abyss." It is literally the last echo of fear from a world built on false maps. Contrast that fading, resentful morality with the sheer, internal strength of the wanderer. He doesn't flinch. He delivers his resolute reply directly into the heat haze. "I am no monster. I am the architect of my own horizon. The abyss is finally clear." And with that absolute assertion of autonomy, the shadow shrinks to absolute nothingness beneath the vertical light. The zenith is achieved. Now, entirely shadowless, the wanderer looks at his reflection in the shimmering air. His mind is no longer a crowded, messy map of golden-leafed gods and scribal errors. It has become a perfectly blank surface, entirely cleansed. He doesn't weep for a home built on mistakes. He stands there as a pioneer. Having destroyed the false idols of the city, he has purchased the deed to his own intellect, and he is finally ready to write his own sovereign law upon the unmapped canvas of the world. So what exactly does he write in the immediate aftermath of noon? On his blank vellum, he dictates 3 new sovereign laws. First, I am the sole author of my virtues. Second, I reject the resentment of the weak. And third, I embrace the beauty of my own fate. These aren't just rules, they are the absolute laws of intellectual sovereignty. And this brings us to our final concept, deeply embedded right there in that third law, amor fate. It is the cold, beautiful acceptance of fate. As the noon light peaks, the wanderer doesn't just tolerate his reality. He embraces the terror and the beauty of the open horizon before him with a profound love for whatever comes next. He is genuinely free. We've traced a massive journey today, from the comforting illusions of the dark city to the harsh, magnificent clarity of the desert noon. So as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this to ponder. If you were to step into the great noon and burn away the ancestral superstitions and absolute myths that you were handed, what sovereign laws would you write on your own blank canvas?